People stopped and stared, not because of the dance, but because of who was dancing. A girl who slept under bridges and stole scraps from trash cans, and a boy who had once danced on Broadway before a fall crushed his spine. On that icy night in Chicago, neither of them should have been there, but maybe that's why they were. She was known as Ghost. Not her real name, but no one ever asked what that was. A wisp of a girl, skinny, pale, eyes sunken but sharp. She had learned long ago that names were for people who were remembered. She preferred to drift. Safer that way. No attachments, no pain. Just survive. Ghost had made the freezing alleys of downtown Chicago her hunting ground. Not for food, but for the coins that fell from distracted pockets. She was fast. Fast enough to grab $1 before the wind blew it away or someone noticed it was gone. But tonight wasn't about coins. That night, Ghost spotted a crowd outside a theater, one of the ritzy ones on North Dearborn. They were filing out, all sequins and furs, the air filled with champagne laughter. Except one didn't. He saw her. Really saw her. He was sitting in a wheelchair by the side entrance, alone, a scarf wrapped tight around his neck and a thick coat draped over his legs. His eyes didn't flinch when they met hers. No disgust, no pity, just interest, like he recognized something in her. She was about to vanish back into the shadows, but something in his look froze her. He beckoned, just a small tilt of his fingers. She didn't move. "You dance?" he asked, voice low but sure. She laughed, sharp and bitter. "I steal." He smiled. Same thing. That answer shouldn't have made sense, but it did. The world took from her. So she took back. A rhythm, a pattern. Survival was its own choreography. She stepped closer, arms crossed, prepared for a trick. Instead, he gestured toward the open space beside him, the glowing sidewalk beneath the street lamp. "Let's dance," he said. Now she thought he was crazy. "What, like right here? You can't even move." He tapped his wheels. "You don't need legs to feel the beat." "Why me?" His eyes flicked to her ripped sleeves, then her bare ankles in the snow. "Because you look like someone who doesn't give a damn anymore." She didn't, but she also didn't understand why her feet were moving. He pressed play on his phone. A slow jazz tune swelled from the speakers. Ghost's fingers curled. She hadn't heard music in so long, not real music. Not since her mother's car broke down with a gospel CD still spinning in the dash. That was 4 foster homes and 2 states ago. Now she stood before a stranger in a wheelchair under the flickering glow of a theater marquee. People were still walking by. Some paused. Some filmed. But for the first time in years, she didn't care. She danced. It wasn't graceful. Her limbs were stiff from cold. Her shoes split at the sole. But she moved with raw honesty, each step defiant, each turn carved from pain. The boy wheeled in tight circles, one arm extended toward her. They never touched, but it didn't matter. It was a duet born from silence, forged in the kind of loneliness only 2 broken souls could understand. When the song ended, no one clapped. No one had to. "Who are you?" she asked, breathless. He gave a crooked grin. "Con me tao." She squinted. "Theo, like short for something?" "Theodore. Theodore McAllister." She froze. That name was everywhere in hospital wings, city benches, charity events. The McAllister fortune ran deeper than the Chicago River. He watched her reaction carefully. "Yeah," he said. "That McAllister." Her spine stiffened. "Why the hell are you out here?" "Because in there," he nodded toward the theater, "nobody looks me in the eye anymore. They just see the chair." Ghost tilted her head. "They see the chair. I'm invisible. Maybe that's why we're talking." That night, they sat together until the wind cut through her coat and her toes went numb. He offered her his scarf. She refused. Instead, she asked, "Why do you ask me to dance?" He hesitated, then said, "Because when I saw you, I remembered what it felt like to fight gravity. She looked down at her torn sneakers. I've been falling for years. They met again the next night, and the next. Each time, their steps grew bolder. Ghost began teaching him rhythms, how to use the spin of his wheels for momentum, how to shift his torso, let his arms do the talking. They would find little pockets of space-empty train platforms, quiet bridges, abandoned rooftops. She'd never been needed before. Not like this. Theo, in return, taught her things too. How to breathe through pain. How to speak to rich people without flinching. How to use words like leverage and foundation without choking on them. You're not just a dancer, he said one night. You're a story. She rolled her eyes. I'm a statistic. Not anymore. Word spread. A video of their first dance went viral. A local blog picked it up. Homeless girl and wheelchair teens midnight ballet. Then came the talk shows, the donations, the questions. Was it real? Was it staged? Ghost didn't care. She had something better now. A name. Not the one on her birth certificate, but a name Theo gave her when the world finally asked. Who is she? She's Ivy, he said simply. And she's mine. He never said girlfriend. Never said project. Just mine. As if he was staking a claim, not over her, but with her. But good things don't last long on the streets. Not when your past has claws. And Ivy's was catching up fast. The first warning came in the form of a shadow. Long, thin, and familiar. Ivy saw it stretch across the bricks of the alley behind the dance studio Theo had convinced his parents to rent for their practice. It slithered toward her like a bad memory. She turned, and there he was, Trevor. You got soft, he said, his voice a scratchy whisper like gravel grinding under boots. Trevor had once been her protector on the streets. Back when she was 13, green and alone, he taught her how to pickpocket without getting caught, how to duck security cams, and how to spot undercover cops. But Trevor wasn't in the business of teaching without taking. He took food, warmth, dignity. And when she finally got the courage to run from him 2 winters ago, she knew he wouldn't forget. What do you want? She asked. He smirked. You. On TV. Dancing with some cripple rich boy. That you now? Gonna marry your way out of the gutter. She took a step back. He matched her. You owe me, Ghost. I don't go by that name anymore. You always will. To people like me. She tried to walk past him, but he grabbed her arm. Theo rolled out from the studio door, just in time to see her flinch. Everything okay? He called. Trevor's eyes lit up. Oh, this him? Damn, you weren't lying. Ivy didn't answer. Theo wheeled forward, calm but firm. Let go of her. Trevor chuckled. Or what? You gonna run me over? Theo didn't blink. If I have to. There was a pause, the kind that felt like it held a knife. Then Trevor grinned. Y'all cute, but this city ain't Disney. Girl like her don't get a prince. She gets a grave. He dropped her arm, turned, and vanished down the alley. Ivy stood frozen. Theo said nothing, just rolled beside her and reached out his hand. She didn't take it, but she didn't run either. Later, she told him everything. How Trevor controlled a small ring of runaways who robbed tourists and boosted phones. How he used fear like a leash. How she thought she'd escaped that world for good. Theo listened. Really listened. Not like someone curious, but like someone mapping a future where her past didn't have to follow. I can help, he said. She shook her head. You don't get it. You help, I become his target. He won't hurt you, Theo. You're the McAllister kid. You've got lawyers, bodyguards, cameras. I've got a jacket with holes and shoes that talk. Then we get you new shoes, he said. But it wasn't about the shoes. It was about believing she had a right to wear them. Theo's parents weren't happy. When Ivy was finally brought home through the back entrance, at Theo's insistence, Mrs. McAllister stiffened. She was tall and narrow, like a sculpture in a museum you weren't allowed to touch. Her pearls looked heavy, her smile even heavier. I hope she understands, she said in her crisply rehearsed tone, that this arrangement is temporary. Theo's father didn't speak. He merely watched her, calculating, measuring. Mr. McAllister had built empires from reading people. To him, Ivy was just another variable. They let her stay in the guest house, under supervision, with conditions. No media interviews, no phone access, no unsupervised time with Theo. It felt like a cage with silk walls. But Ivy endured, because it meant hot showers, real meals, a bed that didn't move with every breath. And Theo, he snuck out nightly, wheeling across the garden path to sit by her window. They whispered through the mesh screen, sharing dreams and fears like children passing notes in class. She told him about her mother, a waitress who vanished one payday and never came back. About the first night she slept under an overpass and woke up to a rat chewing her sock. About the kindness of a librarian who let her sleep in the reading nook so long as she pretended to be browsing. He told her about his accident, how one leap during rehearsal changed his entire future. About the surgeries, the silence, the fake friends who disappeared the moment he needed more than a smile. "You think we're broken," he once said, "but maybe we're just unfinished." "I think we're barely breathing," she replied. And yet, they kept dancing. A charity gala approached. Theo's family hosted it every year, and this time, he demanded to perform with Ivy. "You're out of your mind," his mother said. "You'll humiliate yourself." "I'm not doing it for you." She looked at Ivy. "She'll ruin everything we've built." Theo smiled coldly. "Then maybe it needs to be ruined." Ivy watched the scene from the corner, heart pounding. Part of her wanted to run, but the other part that remembered that night on the sidewalk, that remembered what it felt like to matter, stayed. They rehearsed in secret. They used an abandoned ballroom Theo found in a closed-down hotel. The mirrors were cracked, and pigeons lived in the ceiling, but the floors still shined when the light hit right. Their routine wasn't flashy. No twirls or lifts, just raw movement. Ivy danced around him, not like a satellite to a sun, but like two planets in orbit, both gravitational, both necessary. The night of the gala arrived. She wore a dress Theo had tailored for her, dark blue velvet, off the shoulder, elegant but not flashy. Her hair was cleaned, curled slightly, and pinned back with a silver comb. Theo wheeled into the spotlight beside her, bow tie sharp, eyes burning. Silence fell. Then music. They danced. Not flawlessly. Ivy's heel caught once. Theo's wheel snagged on a corner. But none of it mattered, because the room wasn't watching a performance. It was witnessing a confession. Two broken people telling a room full of money that they were whole when they were together. When the song ended, the applause didn't come immediately. Then it roared. Some guests cried. Some stood. Even Mrs. McAllister dabbed her eyes before quickly regaining composure. But Mr. McAllister, he watched with something else entirely. Strategy. 3 days later, a lawyer came knocking. "I represent a trust fund being established in Ivy's name," he said. "Anonymous donor. Lifetime housing, education, expenses. But there are clauses." Theo read them. Ivy couldn't. "Clause 1, he said quietly. No public relationship with Theo McAllister. Clause 2, no media appearances without pre-approval. Clause 3, full cooperation with a brand makeover, name change, image revamp, identity scrubbing." It was a bribe wrapped in a ribbon. "They want to erase you," Theo whispered. "No," she said. "They want to control me." He took her hand. "Say no. We'll find another way." She didn't answer right away, because the offer, cruel as it was also a door. To safety, to dignity, to not dying in an alley while the city slept. But it cost him, and for once, Ivy didn't know if she was brave enough to choose love over survival. That night, Trevor returned. But this time, he wasn't alone, and Theo was missing. Ivy knew something was wrong the moment she saw the light in the garden flicker and go dark. Theo never missed their midnight window, talks not once. Even the night it rained, he'd rolled out beneath an umbrella just to tell her he'd found a new jazz remix he wanted her to hear. But tonight, there was only silence. The cold in her chest spread slowly as she slipped out the back door, every step pressing down harder on the soil beneath her bare feet. The grass was still wet from the afternoon storm. Wind swept in hard from the lake, scattering leaves along the cobbled path that led to the main house. She paused near the greenhouse. Then she saw it. Theo's wheelchair empty, tipped sideways, one wheel still gently spinning. Her breath caught. Theo. Silence. She ran. But even as her feet moved, she felt the old instinct return. The survival mode that lived in the marrow of kids who knew the underside of bridges better than they knew bed sheets. Her stomach dropped. She didn't go to the McAllisters. She knew what they do. Call security, police, sweep the scandal under the rug before the press got wind of it. They wouldn't move fast enough, and they didn't understand Theo the way she did. They wouldn't know who to look for. But she did. Trevor. She ran 6 blocks barefoot until her soles bled. Then she stole a coat off a laundromat rack, ducked into a pawn shop's awning to catch her breath, and finally made her way to the only place Trevor ever considered home, the abandoned train terminal on Lower Wabash, where the addicts and hustlers slept in broken booths and kids like her were currency. The moment she stepped inside, the stench of piss, rust, and desperation clung to her skin like smoke. She kept her head low, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning. A few familiar faces nodded in vague recognition, but most had the empty look of people who'd stopped counting years. She found him near the ticket counter, surrounded by 2 teens she didn't recognize. One of them held a crowbar. The other had a switchblade in his palm, flicking it open and shut like it was part of his breath. And Theo was their hands zip-tied, lips split, blood crusting at the corner of his mouth. His head drooped, but when Ivy burst through the lobby, he stirred. His eyes widened. Trevor turned. She came. Ivy didn't blink. Let him go. Trevor smirked. Why would I do that? Because I'm what you want. I'm the one who left. He's just bait. Trevor stood. You don't get it. You broke the rules, Ghost. You don't just run from family. We were never family. He stepped closer. You think this boy loves you? He's bored, playing rebel. The second you stop being a story, he'll toss you. He risked everything for me. You used me. Trevor nodded slowly, like her words amused him. Difference is, I never pretended otherwise. Then, faster than she expected, he pulled a blade from his coat. Theo shouted, Ivy! She didn't flinch. She stepped forward. I'm not scared of you anymore. He chuckled. Then you're stupid. Maybe she was. But sometimes stupid was braver than smart. I called someone, she said, bluffing. They're already outside. Police. Press. You touch him, you'll be in cuffs before you can blink. His face darkened. She leaned closer. Let him go, Trevor. Walk away. No one needs to get hurt. Behind her, she heard movement, then tires screeching. Spotlights. Sirens. Voices shouting commands. Theo's parents had tracked his phone. She didn't know whether to laugh or collapse. Trevor turned, caught like a rat under a flashlight. He bolted, the 2 other boys scattering behind him, but they didn't get far. Security tackled them before they made it to the loading docks. Ivy dropped to her knees beside Theo, her hands shaking as she tried to undo the ties. Someone else, probably a guard, cut them with a knife. Theo's first words weren't about pain or fear. You okay? She wanted to cry. Instead, she nodded and gripped his face. You idiot, she whispered. You followed me out there and didn't even text. I didn't know he'd find me. He always finds people like us. They didn't speak again until they were alone, sitting in the back of an ambulance, both swaddled in warm blankets and glowing with the fluorescent lights that always made things look worse than they were. Theo took her hand. They'll never let me see you again after this. She didn't answer, because she knew it was true. The next morning, the internet was on fire. McAllister heir abducted by gang member in city standoff. Mystery girl at heart of McAllister scandal identified. Theo McAllister's secret life and dangerous romance. Photos of Ivy, smeared in dirt, blood on her cheek, eyes full of fury circulated everywhere. But instead of backlash, something strange happened. People sided with her. They weren't supposed to. Girls like Ivy didn't get sympathy. But something about the image of a homeless girl saving the city's golden boy triggered a shift. Blogs praised her courage. TV anchors cried on air recounting the story. Donations poured in not to the McAllisters, but to the shelters Ivy once slept in. A petition was started, "Let Ivy stay." Even celebrities chimed in. But the McAllisters, unsurprisingly, did not. Theo was pulled from public view. His accounts were wiped clean. Ivy was offered Munya Lodovido sign an NDA and disappear quietly. She didn't. Instead, she did something far more dangerous. She danced. The night of her first solo performance, Ivy stood on the very stage she used to clean from the outside window, watching rehearsals from behind glass. Now, the seats were full. Theo wasn't in the front row. He was on stage with her. Despite the threats, despite the warnings, despite his parents' fury, he left home. "I've got enough trust fund money to survive a century," he'd said. "But I won't survive it without you." They danced not just to music, but to silence, to applause, to every heartbreak that had ever tried to break them. Every turn, every roll of Theo's wheels, every flick of Ivy's wrist told a piece of their story. The crowd stood before the last note faded. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Afterward, a journalist asked Ivy what she wanted people to remember. She looked into the camera and said, "That we're not defined by the worst thing that ever happened to us." 2 years later, Ivy ran a nonprofit called the Second Steepa Dance and Outreach Program for homeless teens in Chicago. Theo taught choreography classes from his chair, mentoring kids who thought the world had already discarded them. They still danced together. Not every night, but often enough. One evening, on a rooftop overlooking the city, Theo handed her a small box. "I can't kneel," he said, "but I can ask." She opened the box. No ring. Just a scrap of their old playlist, handwritten, the title circled, "Gravity Can't Touch Us Here." She smiled, tears in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. And beneath the blinking lights of Chicago, they danced again. Not because they had to, but because they could. Winter came back with a vengeance, as it always did in Chicago. But this time, Ivy wasn't sleeping under bridges. She was standing in front of a group of teenagers, the smell of warm cocoa and rubber soles in the air, as she tightened the laces on a boy's sneaker and looked him in the eye. "You don't have to dance like anyone's watching," she said. "Just dance like you're not scared anymore." The kid Tyrese, age 16, former foster runaway, petty theft record nodded slowly. His shoulders were tight with the memory of fists and sirens. But Ivy saw something in him. The same thing Theo once saw in her. Hope. And that's what Second Step had become. Not a charity. Not a photo op. A haven. Set inside a converted post office downtown. The building had 2 full studios, a community kitchen, therapy rooms, and a rooftop garden where kids could look out over the skyline and realize the city didn't own them, it just hadn't met them yet. They taught movement, but more importantly, they taught stillness. The kind that said, "You're safe now." And they did it together, Ivy and Theo. He wheeled in every afternoon with music lists, notebooks, and sometimes snacks from the cafe down the block. His wheelchair was now covered in stickers from all 50 states. Their plan was to eventually take Second Step nationwide, maybe global. But for now, 1 block at a time was enough. And yet, Not everything healed overnight. Ivy still had nightmares. Sometimes she woke up gasping, seeing Trevor's shadow, or hearing the cold snap of zip ties in her dreams. Other times, she woke with a guilt she couldn't name, the part of her that still didn't believe she deserved warmth or love or anything that couldn't be stolen. Theo understood. He never tried to fix her. He just stayed. On their wedding day, they skipped the cathedral. Ivy didn't want gold-trimmed ceilings or velvet pews. She wanted the sidewalk where they first danced. So, they blocked off the streeties. Permits were involved in, strung up fairy lights from the lampposts. Musicians from a neighborhood volunteered. Guests stood in coats and scarves, some holding hot cider, others holding back tears. Theo rolled down the aisle between folding chairs. Ivy walked, barefoot by choice, in a white dress she had sewn from thrifted fabric and pieces of Theo's old stage costumes. Their vows were simple. I found you when I thought I was lost, and you taught me that broken isn't the end. They danced, this time to cheers. But the miracle wasn't the wedding. The miracle was what happened next. One night, nearly a year after their ceremony, Ivy received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. The envelope was wrinkled, the handwriting shaky. From Sarah Winters. She froze. That name had been a ghost her entire life. Her mother. The return address was in Michigan. Theo sat beside her as she opened it. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, Ivy, or if you should. I've carried the weight of leaving you for more years than I carried you in my arms. I was sick. I was scared. I thought giving you up would save you. I see now I was wrong. But someone showed me a video of your dance. And I knew that was you. I knew that no matter how far I ran, your light survived me. I want to meet, if you'll let me. Not as a mother, just as a woman who never stopped wondering what kind of miracle you might become. Love, always, Mom. Ivy didn't speak for a long time. She folded the letter, placed it on the table, and went for a walk. When she returned, Theo didn't ask what she decided. He just reached for her hand. The next month, they drove to a small town outside Ann Arbor. The meeting wasn't magical. Her mother looked older than Ivy remembered, wrinkled, worn, sober. They didn't hug right away. Didn't even talk much. Just sat in silence for a while. But when Ivy stood to leave, her mother pressed something into her hand. It was a photo cracked at the edges. Of Ivy, age 4, in a yellow tutu. I kept it, she whispered, even when I had nothing else. Ivy didn't cry until they were halfway back to Chicago. Then she didn't stop. Years passed. Theo published a memoir called Wheels and Wings. It became a bestseller not because of fame, but because of truth. In it, he wrote about pain and pressure, about falling and standing in the same breath. About Ivy. Ivy never read the book in public, but in private, she held it like a lifeline. The foundation grew. More Second Step centers opened in Detroit, then New Orleans, then Oakland. Former street kids became instructors. Survivors became mentors. They never forgot where they started. On the anniversary of their first dance, they returned to that corner outside the theater on North Dearborn. The city had installed a small plaque there. Here, two souls reminded Chicago that hope doesn't ask for permission. They danced, and people watched, not out of shock, not out of charity, but out of wonder. Because miracles don't always wear halos or shine like gold. Sometimes they wear scuffed sneakers and rolled down cracked sidewalks. Sometimes they come from nothing and choose to build everything. And sometimes they find each other not to complete one another, but to remind the world that wholeness is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about showing up anyway. It's about choosing love even when you've never been taught how. That was the miracle, not the dance, not the fame, but the fact that two broken people looked at the world instead of flinching. They twirled. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, Please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.